Justice delayed is not justice denied. Let that line hit your enemies like a thunderbolt. Those who doubted you, those who whispered, "It's impossible," in the shadows of your struggle, they're not just wrong, they're defeated, shaken, and now they sit in stunned silence, grappling with the bitter truth. Your case is resolved, your victory sealed, and their schemes crushed under the weight of divine justice. And thank you, yes, you, the chosen one. Whether this is your first time here, or you've been a steadfast warrior on this journey, your presence and super gifts are the fire that fuels this mission of triumph. Tonight isn't just another moment, it's the moment. If you're ready to step into your victory, silence the doubters, and claim the power that's been yours all along, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a number 77 in the comments below as your declaration. My case is closed, and my rise has begun. Let's step into the night, because before it ends, your transformation will be undeniable. Let's get started. Welcome, chosen one. You didn't stumble here by accident. This moment, this very night, was written long before your enemies even knew your name. The universe has spoken, and when it declares, "Case closed," even the most cunning adversaries can't appeal. The verdict isn't just final, it's unbreakable, like a sword forged in fire and cooled in divine waters. Your enemies thought they had time to wear you down, to feed you lies, to make you question your strength. They said, "You're finished." They mocked you behind closed doors, chuckled over your so-called failures, and slept soundly in their arrogance. But guess what? They were wrong. And tonight, they'll sleep in disbelief, haunted by the realization that their time is over. You've won, and there's no coming back from it. This is bigger than just personal victories. Your enemies represent doubt, fear, and all the chains that tried to hold you down. They were counting on you to keep pacing, keep worrying, keep believing their lies. But now, they're choking on their own disbelief because the gavel has dropped. Heaven has ruled in your favor. So let them wrestle with their shock. Let them stay awake, tormented by the fact that they underestimated you. Their whispers of "it's impossible" are now a chorus of regret. They're scrambling, asking themselves how this happened, but deep down, they already know. It's because you are chosen. And you're no longer a fighter in the trenches. You're the victor standing tall on the battlefield, watching the smoke clear as your enemies retreat. You're not chasing justice anymore. It's already yours. Tonight, the universe has slammed its gavel and declared, enough. No more pacing. No more imaginary arguments. No more wasting time on battles already won. Let this moment fuel your fire. Remember this: a lion doesn't turn back for barking dogs. Your enemies can howl all they want, but the roar of your victory drowns them out. It's time to rise, time to embrace the power that was always yours. Let's dive in. Your case is closed, and your enemies? They're stunned, silenced, and powerless. And now let's dive into this, step by step. Believe me, you should never miss what's coming next. Number 1. The hammer has dropped, and your enemies are crushed. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. That's the truth your enemies are choking on right now. They thought they could outsmart divine timing, manipulate outcomes, and keep you trapped in their web of schemes. But here's the reality. The hammer has dropped. The case is closed. Their plans are not just undone, they're obliterated, crushed under the unstoppable weight of heaven's verdict. This isn't some human court where they can charm, appeal, or buy more time. No. This is the court of the universe, and its judgment doesn't bend to their arrogance or cunning. When heaven declares it's done, the universe itself aligns. Stars move, seas shift, and time obeys to enforce the ruling. And that ruling, it's in your favor. Your enemies didn't see this coming. Oh, they were smug, weren't they? Convinced they could bury you under the weight of lies, obstacles, and endless battles. But they didn't realize they were stacking their weapons against divine will. And now, every trap they set has backfired. The pit they dug for you has become their own grave. How is this possible? They'll whisper in disbelief, pacing in circles, searching for a loophole that doesn't exist. The answer is simple. You were never fighting alone. The universe was always orchestrating a plan so precise, so unshakable, that their strongest schemes crumbled like a house of cards. You might still feel the weight of yesterday's fight lingering, but hear this: the battle is over. The gavel didn't just fall, it shattered every chain they thought would hold you. Your circumstances may not reflect it yet, but make no mistake. Your victory has been decided, sealed, and executed in the highest court. Heaven doesn't need your permission, your understanding, or even your feelings to enforce its will. History echoes with moments like these. Think of David standing before Goliath. Did anyone believe he had a chance? His enemies certainly didn't. Yet, with one stone, he didn't just win. He annihilated the very idea of their superiority. That's the energy you carry now. One moment, one decree, and the power of heaven has turned your story upside down. Your enemies? They're in disarray, stunned, silenced, and scrambling to make sense of how their plans disintegrated. They thought they had time to celebrate your downfall, but now they sit in shock, realizing the clock ran out while they weren't looking. And you're stepping into the undeniable truth. The hammer has dropped, and your enemies are crushed. This isn't just a victory, it's a declaration. You've moved from defense to dominance, from pleading to reigning. The time for worrying is over. The gavel has fallen. The verdict is final. And your enemies? They're left choking on the dust of their own defeat. Number 2, the silence that shakes your enemies. Silence is the sleep that nourishes wisdom. These words by Francis Bacon take on a different power when you realize the silence of the universe is not a void, but a weapon. It's not abandonment, it's strategy. And if you're feeling uneasy, confused, or even abandoned in this silence, know this: your enemies are feeling it too. Except for them, it's not unsettling, it's terrifying. The universe's silence is not hesitation, it's the calm after the verdict. Think of it like the pause after a judge's gavel drops in a courtroom. No one speaks, no one dares. Why? Because the case is done. The decision has been made, and no further arguments can overturn it. This is where you are now. The gavel has fallen, the universe has spoken, and the silence you're experiencing is the echo of finality. Your enemies, however, aren't seeing this as peace. For them, this silence is deafening. They don't know what's coming next, and that uncertainty eats at their confidence. They're scrambling, searching for signs, praying for some gap in the verdict, some loophole to exploit. But there's none. The silence of the divine is their undoing, because it confirms what they fear most. They've lost, and they can't reverse it. But for you, that silence is a fortress. It's proof that the work has already been done. You might ask, why doesn't the universe say something now? Give me another sign, another word. Because when the highest authority has already spoken, no further discussion is needed. Heaven doesn't waste its breath explaining itself to doubters, and it doesn't repeat its rulings to soothe anxieties. The silence itself is the proof that it's finished. Think of the great moments in history where silence followed decisive action. when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon and declared, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The world didn't erupt into immediate noise. There was a moment of stunned silence, a pause where the weight of what had just happened settled in. That's where you are now. The silence you feel isn't absence, it's awe. The universe has already dismantled the traps, silenced the opposition, and set your path straight. You're standing in the stillness of victory. Your enemies, they're mistaking this silence for an opening, but every move they make only further exposes their defeat. Like a hunter caught in his own snare, their panic deepens as they realize the net tightening around them is of their own design. So, let the silence stretch. Let it be the answer to your doubts and the terror of your enemies. You don't need loud declarations when the work is already done. Rest in the quiet assurance that heaven doesn't make promises it can't keep. The silence isn't a void, it's a roar they can't escape. This is not a waiting period, it's a confirmation. The universe's silence is its exclamation mark, declaring to you and your enemies alike, it's over. The case is closed. The victory is yours. Number 3. The eternal clock that defeats your enemies. The future is not some place we are going to, but one we are creating. John Shah's words hold a profound truth. While we scramble to navigate time, the universe moves outside of it, crafting outcomes that have already been written into eternity. Your enemies? They're stuck playing catch-up, locked in the narrow confines of human time, completely oblivious to the fact that their schemes were dismantled before they even began. Here's the truth that crushes their plans. The universe doesn't operate on the same timeline as they do, or as you do. While they plot and maneuver in minutes and days, trying to exploit fleeting opportunities, the universe has already completed the story. When heaven declares your case is closed, it's not a prediction or a vague hope for the future. It's an eternal decree. The gavel fell before the battle even started, and your victory was set in stone long before your enemies even had a chance to lift their swords. Imagine watching a chess game where the winner already knows every move, every counter, every strategy. That's how the universe operates. Before you even knew the challenge existed, your victory had already been declared. While your enemies were busy assembling their plans, they were playing into a timeline where their defeat was inevitable. But why doesn't it feel like I've won yet, you might wonder? Because we live bound by seconds and minutes, we only see the process in real time. The universe, however, sees the entire story, beginning, middle, and triumphant end, all at once. What looks like delay or uncertainty to you is simply the unfolding of a plan that's already complete. Your enemies? They're prisoners of time, scrambling to react to a divine decree they can't comprehend. They're stuck in the illusion that they have power, unaware that every moment they waste is another step closer to their inevitable downfall. Like a villain in a movie whose fate is sealed from the first scene, they can't escape the script written against them. Take a moment to consider this. When the universe speaks, it speaks from the end of the story, not the beginning. It's like hearing an author say, "The hero wins," while you're still on chapter 5. You may not see the final page yet, but the ending is already written. Your battle isn't being decided as you fight. It was resolved before you even stepped onto the field. Think of leaders like Abraham Lincoln, who endured years of conflict, but moved with the quiet confidence that freedom's victory was inevitable. His enemies didn't understand that their efforts were doomed from the start, because the arc of history had already bent toward justice. That's where you are now. Your story has already turned toward triumph, and your enemies are powerless to rewrite it. So let them scramble, let them plan. They're fighting a battle that's already over, trying to rewrite an ending that's locked in eternity. The universe doesn't just predict your victory, it has already lived it, and every passing moment is simply the unfolding of what has always been yours. Your enemies are playing a game that's already finished, and the clock they're watching is irrelevant. The eternal clock of the universe has already declared, you've won. Number 4, the order has been issued, and there's no turning back. Order is heaven's first law. This truth, immortalized by Alexander Pope, reveals the precision and power behind the spiritual protocol that governs the universe. When heaven declares a verdict, it isn't open for negotiation, and it doesn't require anyone's approval. The command has been issued, the wheels of destiny are turning, and your enemies, they're powerless to stop it. Let's be clear, the spiritual court doesn't operate like the chaotic, flawed systems of this world. There's no hung jury, no mistrial, no last-minute appeals. When heaven declares, it is finished, the decree is stamped with divine authority. Angels are not just observers, they are the executors of this protocol. Like warriors armed with the word, they move swiftly, dismantling opposition, breaking strongholds, and ensuring that the will of the universe is fulfilled with precision. Meanwhile, your enemies, those who plotted, schemed, and underestimated you, are now in a state of panic. They thought they had time to delay the inevitable, but the protocol is already in motion. It's unstoppable. The divine courtroom doesn't delay justice. It ensures it arrives exactly on time, in ways so thorough and complete that even the smallest detail is accounted for. You might be wondering, why does it feel like nothing has changed yet? Why don't I see the results immediately? Here's the answer. Spiritual protocols don't just ripple through the heavens. They manifest in the physical realm with precision. What was decreed above is now aligning below. It's like watching a master architect at work. The blueprint has been finalized and the construction is underway. What you perceive as a delay is actually the machinery of heaven ensuring that everything is executed flawlessly. Think of history's great moments of triumph. When Martin Luther King Jr. declared, "I have a dream," his words weren't just a speech. They were a declaration that triggered a chain of events that shook the foundations of society. Change didn't appear overnight, but the spiritual protocol was set in motion, and no force, no opposition could stop its inevitable unfolding. That's the kind of power at work in your life now. Your enemies, meanwhile, are scrambling. They sense the shift, but can't grasp its full magnitude. They're trying to counteract what's happening, but every effort is futile. The decree has been issued. Their resistance is like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. The harder they fight, the more they expose themselves to the unstoppable force of divine will. And you don't need to second-guess or question the process. The order has been issued. The case is closed. Heaven's courtroom doesn't make mistakes, and its protocols don't falter. Trust the precision of the divine system that's working on your behalf. What's coming for you isn't just a resolution, it's a transformation. The chains are broken, the tables have turned, and the verdict is being carried out in ways so powerful and undeniable that even your enemies will have to admit defeat. The hammer has fallen, the angels are moving, and your victory is being established step by step. There's no turning back now. The spiritual protocol is complete. The unstoppable chain of events is unfolding, and nothing, absolutely nothing, can reverse it. Your victory is not just assured, it's in progress. Watch it manifest. Number 5. The masterstroke that leaves your enemies reeling. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Sun Tzu's words have never rung truer than in this moment. The universe doesn't act impulsively, and it never moves without a plan. When the case against you was closed, it wasn't just about ending the battle. It was about unveiling a masterstroke of divine strategy, so precise, so powerful, that it leaves your enemies not just defeated, but dumbfounded. Think about it. What felt like an ending to you wasn't an ending at all. It was the first chess move in a game your enemies didn't even realize they were playing. While they were busy plotting your downfall, the universe was orchestrating their defeat and setting the stage for your rise. Every delay, every silence, every moment of uncertainty was part of a larger strategy that goes beyond resolving your struggle. It was about elevating you and showcasing the power, purpose, and glory that only divine intervention can bring. Your enemies thought they had you cornered, like a player with no moves left in a game of chess. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. The universe doesn't play to survive. It plays to checkmate. While they were busy celebrating your supposed defeat, heaven was already 3 moves ahead, setting up a plan so intricate that their downfall was inevitable. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery and thrown into prison, Joseph's life seemed like a series of cruel endings. But each twist and turn was part of a divine strategy that ultimately positioned him as a ruler in Egypt, saving countless lives during a famine, including those of the very brothers who betrayed him. What looked like defeat at every step was, in reality, a strategy so profound that it transformed Joseph's pain into purpose. The same principle applies to you. The closure of your case wasn't random or rushed. It was deliberate and deeply strategic. Every obstacle you faced, every attack from your enemies, was used as fuel for your elevation. The universe didn't just remove the barriers in your life, it turned them into stepping stones. What your enemies intended for harm has been repurposed into the very foundation of your victory. Now, your enemies sit in stunned disbelief, scrambling to understand how their plans crumbled so completely. They thought they could outwit the universe, but their strategies were no match for divine wisdom. Their attempts to harm you only amplified the magnitude of your triumph. And you're stepping into a new chapter, not just as someone who overcame, but as someone who embodies the power of divine strategy. Your victory isn't just about you. It's a testament to the precision and purpose of heaven's plan. This unveiling of divine strategy isn't just about silencing your enemies. It's about showing the world that when the universe moves, it doesn't just win, it redefines the game. And now, the stage is set for you to shine, proving that no weapon, no scheme, no enemy can ever stand against a plan designed by the divine. Number 6. When heaven says enough, it's game over. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. These words, famously spoken by Martin Luther King Jr., ring loud in this moment. Except here, the bending is over. Justice has landed squarely on your side, and the universe has declared one word over your enemies: enough. Not a plea, not a warning, a final and irreversible decree. For too long, your enemies have thrived on chaos, feeding off your struggles and hoping your faith would break. They've whispered lies in the shadows, planted doubts in your mind, and celebrated every stumble along your journey. But now, their time is up. The universe doesn't negotiate with darkness, doesn't tolerate persistent attacks, and doesn't leave loose ends. When it steps in and declares, enough, it's not a ceasefire. It's the total annihilation of the enemy's power over your life. Your enemies are stunned, their schemes dismantled. They were bold when they thought they held the upper hand. They threw everything they had at you, believing they could grind you down, wear you out, and leave you questioning your purpose. But now they're silenced. Permanently. This isn't a temporary pause like a boxer catching his breath between rounds. No, this is the final bell. The match is over, and they're the ones knocked out. You might wonder, but how can I be sure? What if the attacks come back? The answer is simple. The universe doesn't leave battles half won. When it speaks, creation itself obeys. Seas part, storms cease, and enemies fall silent. Not for a moment, but for eternity. Look to history. When Moses stretched out his hand and the Red Sea swallowed Pharaoh's army, did any of them come back for round two? Number. The battle was over and the victory was permanent. Your enemies may not have seen it coming, but deep down they knew this day would arrive. They might have laughed at your struggles, but they never understood the depth of your resilience or the power of divine timing. And now, as their voices are silenced, their laughter turns into stunned disbelief. They are left with nothing, no weapons, no strategies, no voice. For you, this isn't just the end of an attack, it's the beginning of your reign. The universe doesn't just silence the enemy, it clears the path for you to rise higher, stronger, and freer than ever before. While your enemies retreat in shame, you're moving forward with authority, walking in the victory that was always yours. So, let their silence be your song of triumph. Their weapons have failed, their words have died in their throats, and their presence has been erased from your journey. They will not rise again, because heaven's decree isn't subject to reversal. The gavel has fallen and the enemy is silenced forever. This is your time. The chapter of battles is closed. The book of victory has begun. And your enemies? They're nothing but a memory, swept away by the unstoppable power of divine justice. Number 7. When heaven throws a party, your enemies tremble. Rejoice with those who rejoice. But let's get one thing clear. When heaven rejoices over your victory, it's not just a celebration, it's a declaration of dominion. Your enemies hear the thunderous applause from the heavens and know their time is up. The sound of divine celebration isn't music to their ears, it's the tolling of their defeat. When the universe rules in your favor, heaven doesn't just nod in quiet approval. No, it erupts. Angels burst into song, trumpets echo across eternity, and joy reverberates through the heavens like a seismic wave. This isn't a small victory lap. It's a cosmic celebration of justice, mercy, and love. And while you may still be adjusting to the weight of your victory, the spiritual realm is already partying like it's been done, because it has. But why does heaven rejoice so wildly over your case? The answer is simple. Your victory is proof of the universe's justice in action. The angels saw the battle. They saw the traps, the lies, the relentless schemes of your enemies. And now they've seen those schemes dismantled, crushed, and rendered useless. They're not just celebrating your win, they're celebrating the triumph of righteousness itself. Think of it like a courtroom scene, but on a universal scale. When the gavel dropped and the ruling came down in your favor, heaven didn't just breathe a sigh of relief, it exploded in triumphant cheers. Imagine standing on the steps of a courthouse and hearing an entire city erupt in applause for your victory. That's the scale of what's happening in the spiritual realm right now. But let's not forget what this celebration means for your enemies. The sound of heaven's rejoicing is deafening to them. It's a reminder of their failure, their powerlessness against divine authority. They thought they had the upper hand, that their plans were airtight, but now they're witnessing the impossible. your rise, your vindication, your unshakable victory. And as heaven celebrates, your enemies are shrinking back, their confidence shattered, their plans exposed as futile. History is full of moments like this. When Nelson Mandela walked free after 27 years, the world didn't just cheer for the man, it celebrated the triumph of justice over oppression. That's the energy heaven brings when it rules in your favor. It's not just about you, it's about the principle that justice always prevails, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And you're the centerpiece of this celebration. Heaven doesn't rejoice over failure or compromise. It rejoices over the strength it took for you to endure, the faith it took for you to hold on, and the undeniable truth that you are chosen, victorious, and unstoppable. So let the sound of heaven's celebration fuel you. Let it remind you that the universe isn't just rooting for you, it's moving for you. And as the angels dance and sing, your enemies are left with nothing but silence and regret. Their plans are dust, and your victory is eternal. The case is closed, and heaven is throwing a party in your honor. Your enemies, they're watching from the shadows, powerless, as your light shines brighter than ever. Number 8. When the curtain falls, you rise. What defines us is how well we rise after falling. These words carry a deeper truth when the universe steps in and declares your case closed. It's not just a matter of resolution, it's the moment of reinvention. When heaven's gavel falls, it doesn't just end the battle, it rewrites your story, leaving your enemies clutching at a version of you that no longer exists. Your struggles? They were chapters, not your title. For too long, you may have carried the labels others imposed on you: failure, broken, unworthy. But the universe doesn't see you through the lens of your mistakes or your pain. When it closes your case, it doesn't just remove the struggle, it removes the weight of your old identity. It's a divine reset, a moment where everything shifts and who you are is redefined, not by the battle you endured, but by the victory you've claimed. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. For years his identity was tied to his suffering, a prisoner, a victim of injustice. But when the universe closed his case, it didn't just free him from the pit, it elevated him to the palace. Overnight, the man who was a prisoner became a ruler. His enemies had to bow to the very person they once scorned. That's the power of divine closure. It doesn't just resolve, it transforms. Your enemies, however, aren't ready for this. They've spent so long defining you by your struggle that they can't comprehend the new you. Their words, their schemes, their attempts to keep you down, they're now aimed at a shadow of who you used to be. Imagine them still trying to mock the caterpillar when you've already spread your wings as a butterfly. They're fighting a battle that ended before they even knew it began. But here's the most important part. Divine closure isn't just about proving your enemies wrong. It's about proving to yourself who you truly are. The scars of your past are no longer wounds. They're medals, reminders of the battles you've survived and the victories you've won. The chains that once held you down, they've been melted into the crown you now wear. This is not a cosmetic change, it's a foundational shift. You're not just the person who overcame, you're the person who was transformed by the overcoming. The universe doesn't just close your case, it erases the old script and writes a new one with you as the protagonist, stronger, wiser, and untouchable. Let your enemies wrestle with their disbelief. Let them try to make sense of the new you. Their confusion is proof of your transformation. They'll keep calling out to the person you once were, but you're no longer there. The case is closed, the curtain has fallen, and you've risen, unshackled and unstoppable. This is your divine rebirth. Your identity is no longer tied to your struggles, but to your triumphs. You're no longer defined by what you endured. You're defined by what you've become. And what you've become is untouchable. Number 9. When one door slams shut, miracles kick open another. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Napoleon Hill's words ring true, especially when it comes to the divine workings of the universe. What looks like the end, a slammed door, a case closed, is often the very soil where miracles begin to bloom. Your struggle may feel like it's over, but in truth, it's only the prologue to a story far greater than you could ever imagine. Think of it. When the universe declares your case closed, it isn't just a declaration of finality. It's a stage being set, a spotlight being adjusted, and a curtain rising. You may see the gavel fall as the end of your battle, but the universe sees it as the opening act of a miracle that will leave your enemies stunned, silenced, and defeated in ways they never expected. Imagine a courtroom scene where the verdict is read, and everyone thinks it's over. But behind the scenes, while the courtroom empties, the real work begins. That's the universe. When your case is closed, it's not because the chapter ends, but because the transformation begins. This isn't about shutting down your story. It's about rewriting it with a pen dipped in divine ink. History shows us the pattern. Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, could have seen his betrayal as the end of the road. Case closed, right? But the universe doesn't operate on human limitations. What seemed like Joseph's final defeat was the very door that led him to become the second most powerful man in Egypt, saving countless lives, including those of the brothers who betrayed him. The case wasn't closed, it was elevated. You might feel like the chapter is over, that the struggle has ended, and now there's just emptiness. But here's the truth. Miracles often rise from what looks like a dead end. The same gavel that silences your enemies also builds the foundation for something extraordinary. What you see as a slammed door is actually the sound of chains breaking, of new beginnings being forged in the fires of your perseverance. And your enemies? Oh, they think they've won. They're celebrating prematurely, convinced that the silence after the verdict means they've gotten away with their schemes. But they're about to witness something they can't explain, something they'll never recover from, the miracle that springs from the very case they thought was closed. Miracles don't just emerge quietly, they explode into existence, shattering every doubt, defying every limit, and exposing every lie. The universe doesn't just resolve your struggle, it transforms it into a spectacle of glory so undeniable that even your enemies have to acknowledge it. So, stand firm in this moment. The gavel has fallen, yes, but listen closely. That sound isn't just an end. It's the drumbeat of something far greater coming your way. The case is closed, but the miracle, it's just getting started. Number 10. Burn the bridge, walk the path. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. captured the essence of what's required when the universe declares a case closed. Radical, unshakable faith. And that kind of faith isn't polite or tentative. It's bold, fiery, and uncompromising. It's the kind of faith that demands you burn the bridge to your past, turn your back on what-ifs, and stride forward as if the ground beneath your feet was laid just for you. When heaven issues its decree, it's done. It's not a suggestion. It's a divine command. Yet so many falter at this moment, peeking over their shoulder, questioning whether they can really trust the verdict. That hesitation, It's the enemy's last desperate trick. Doubt is the final weapon of the defeated, a whisper in your ear trying to convince you that maybe, just maybe, you should still worry about the battle that's already over. Don't fall for it. Radical faith is not for the faint-hearted. It's a declaration of war against hesitation. It's what propelled Moses to stretch his staff over the Red Sea, not knowing exactly how the waters would part. It's what made Harriet Tubman lead hundreds to freedom, even when her enemies doubled their efforts to capture her. It's what kept Mandela strong, even when the world seemed to have forgotten him in prison. They didn't wait for every detail to fall into place. They acted in faith, trusting that the universe's verdict had already paved their way. You might be asking, but how do I step forward when I still feel uncertain? The answer is simple. Stop feeding your uncertainty. Radical faith requires starving your doubts and feeding your conviction. The universe doesn't close a case without reason. His timing is flawless, his rulings are unshakable, and his decisions are always for your ultimate good. Looking back, second-guessing or obsessing over the details doesn't change the verdict. It only slows your progress. Your enemies would love nothing more than for you to stay frozen, paralyzed by what-ifs. They thrive on your hesitation, hoping it will lead to self-sabotage. But here's what they can't handle: your absolute, unwavering belief in the finality of your victory. Radical faith not only moves mountains, it buries your enemies under the rubble. So, stop revisiting the battlefield. The war is over. Your weapons aren't needed anymore, and your scars don't need to be reopened. Heaven's gavel has fallen, and your only responsibility now is to trust the path ahead. Radical faith demands action. It demands forward movement, even if the horizon is obscured. It demands that you leave behind every doubt, fear, and lie that ever tried to chain you to the past. The universe has spoken, and His word is final. Walk forward with the kind of faith that leaves your enemies trembling, because they know what you're about to discover. There's nothing left to stop you. Number 11. Yesterday's chains are shattered forever. No man can step into the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. Heraclitus's ancient wisdom reminds us of a timeless truth. The past is powerless unless you give it permission to control your present. And when the universe declares your case closed, it doesn't just slam the door on your struggle. It burns the bridge to the past that tried to hold you captive. Your enemies will try to argue otherwise. They'll whisper, "Remember where you came from. Remember what you did." But their words are as hollow as echoes in an empty chamber. Why? Because the past cannot contend with a case that has already been resolved. What once defined you no longer has jurisdiction over your future. The gavel has fallen, and the chains of yesterday have been shattered, leaving your enemies grasping at ghosts. Let me ask you this: how often have you been haunted by mistakes, failures, and wounds from your past? Those moments may have felt permanent, etched into the fabric of your identity. But here's the truth: your enemies don't want you to understand. When the universe closes a case, it doesn't just resolve your present battle. It uproots every tether that tried to drag you back. The evidence of your past has been wiped clean, the record sealed, and the judgment overturned in your favor. Consider this. Would you keep trying to pay off a debt that has already been forgiven? That's what dwelling on your past is like. Yet your enemies will try to convince you otherwise. Why? Because the past is the only weapon they have left. But what they don't realize is this: their ammunition is useless. The universe has nullified it, rendering their attacks powerless. Think of the greatest comeback stories in history: Oprah Winfrey, rejected and ridiculed early in her career, didn't let her past define her. Instead, she became a force of influence that her detractors couldn't ignore. Or Nelson Mandela, whose 27 years in prison were supposed to break him. Instead, they prepared him for a legacy that reshaped an entire nation. Their pasts were not stumbling blocks. They were stepping stones. And so is yours. When the universe closes your case, it declares that your past is not a courtroom where your enemies can prosecute you anymore. They'll try to drag you back there, but the doors are locked and the verdict is untouchable. The past may have shaped you, but it no longer has the power to define you. Your enemies are furious about this. They're scrambling to resurrect old battles, desperate to regain control. But their efforts are as futile as trying to ignite a fire with ashes. The universe has spoken. It is finished. The past is not just irrelevant, it's obsolete. So walk forward boldly, knowing that what's behind you has no authority over what's ahead. The power of yesterday's chains is broken. The past cannot contend with a closed case, and neither can your enemies. Let them watch, helpless and stunned, as you rise into the future they can no longer touch. Number 12. When the clock strikes midnight, chains shatter. The darkest hour is just before the dawn. This timeless proverb isn't just poetic, it's prophetic. Midnight, that fleeting moment when one day ends and another begins, is far more than a time on the clock. It's the threshold of victory, the battlefield where endings transform into beginnings, and darkness gives way to an unstoppable light. Your enemies fear midnight. Why? Because they know that throughout history, it has been the stage for divine intervention. Midnight isn't just a turning point, it's a declaration that the waiting is over. In Scripture, it's the hour when breakthroughs erupt with power and clarity. Paul and Silas, chained and beaten, prayed and sang at midnight. And what happened? The prison walls shook, the chains fell off, and doors swung open. Their enemies didn't see it coming, and neither did yours. Midnight doesn't whisper freedom, it roars it. Right now, as the clock ticks toward that prophetic hour, you might feel the weight of your struggle pressing harder than ever. It's no coincidence. The enemy knows the significance of midnight. They know it's the moment when their grip is torn away, and they're left powerless in the face of your breakthrough. Think about the Exodus. At midnight, the firstborn of Egypt fell, and the Israelites were released from centuries of bondage. It wasn't just freedom, it was vindication, a public spectacle of deliverance that no enemy could deny. Midnight is not an end, it's a transition. It's when the gavel of heaven strikes louder than ever, shattering every remaining chain and silencing every lingering doubt. The enemy's laughter turns to silence, their smugness to panic, as they realize they've lost not just the battle, but the entire war. Midnight is their undoing, and your rise. Consider this. Why does darkness feel so heavy right before midnight? It's because the enemy senses what's coming. They've read this story before. They know the pattern. But no matter how hard they try to stop it, they can't. Midnight isn't something they control. It's divine timing, precision engineered by heaven itself. You might ask, why midnight? Why does breakthrough happen then? Because midnight symbolizes the death of what was and the birth of what will be. It's the moment when heaven draws a line in the sand and says, no more. It's the transition from despair to hope, from struggle to triumph. So when you stand at the threshold of midnight, know this: your enemies are already trembling. They see the chains loosening, the walls shaking, and the doors opening. They're scrambling for an escape route, but there's none. Midnight is your victory hour. As the clock strikes, the universe declares with finality, the old is gone. The new has come. The case is closed. The chains are broken. Your freedom is here. Midnight isn't just a time, it's the triumph your enemies never thought possible. But it's happening, right now. And so, the hammer has dropped, the silence has spoken, and the midnight hour has declared your victory. The case is closed, the chains are broken, and your enemies are left in stunned defeat. This is your moment, chosen one. Step into it boldly, knowing the universe has already secured your triumph. No more doubts, no more battles. It's done. If this message resonates with you, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments as your declaration of freedom. Share this with someone who needs to know their midnight is coming. Your victory inspires others. Let's rise together.